The Zodiac Killer's letters to the police were filled with cryptic clues, red herrings, and outright lies. But his ultimate goal was to play a game of cat and mouse with law enforcement, and he seemed to always be 10 steps ahead of them. Join me as we look into some of the things he told the police about himself that may just break the case. On October 11th, 1969, a man identifying himself only as Zodiac wrote a letter to the San Francisco Police Department. He bragged about how he had terrorized the city for months and taunted them for not being able to catch him. But he didn't stop there. He went on to tell them that he had a .38 caliber revolver in his glove box and a .22 caliber in his pocket. He also said that he planned on going hunting. Now you might think this is just another boastful letter from a killer who thought he was smarter than the police. But when they searched his car, they found exactly what he said he had: a .38 caliber revolver and a .22 caliber pistol. That's right. The first time the police searched his car, they found both weapons mentioned in the letter. But this isn't where the story ends. You see, after finding the weapons, they sent them to the lab for ballistics testing. They compared the bullets to the ones found at all of the crime scenes, but none of them matched. So it seems like Zodiac was trying to throw them off his scent with another false lid. But then again, maybe the bullets hadn't been fired yet. It's just speculation at this point, but the fact that he was so precise about the caliber of his weapons while lying about the actual bullets themselves was a masterstroke in misdirection. Now let's move on to another fascinating piece of the puzzle. On September 26, 1969, 2 men were shot in Santa Rosa, California. While the police were investigating the crime scene, they found a wallet belonging to one of the victims. When they opened it up, they found a small piece of paper inside. At first glance, it looked like a receipt, but upon closer inspection, it became clear that it wasn't. The writing was too neat and the content too cryptic. It was a coded message left by the killer. What made this case even more perplexing was the fact that the victims had no connection to the Zodiac Killer's previous crimes. This wasn't like the other attacks. There was no young couple parked in a secluded area or lone hitchhiker walking along the highway. These men were simply out for an evening stroll when they were gunned down. So why did the killer leave this coded message behind? Was he trying to taunt the police? Or was he leaving a calling card for his next victim? We don't know for sure. But what we do know is that the coded message contained a significant clue that could have led the police to the killer's identity. You see, the piece of paper contained a cipher that, when decoded, revealed a shocking truth. The Zodiac Killer's real name was Gary Francis Post. Now you might be thinking, what does Gary Francis Post have to do with me? Well, if you live in the United States, there's a good chance you've heard his name before. You see, Gary Francis Post was also known as the Postman. In the late 1970s, he became notorious for killing 8 people in California. But there's more to the story. You see, the police believe that Gary Francis Post may have been the real Zodiac Killer. That's right. All those years ago, when they found the coded message in the victim's wallet, they had the killer's real name in their hands. But somehow it took them decades to connect the dots. In 2021, a team of cold case investigators and independent researchers finally cracked the code. They discovered that the cipher on the piece of paper was a simple alphanumeric substitution. Each letter of the alphabet was replaced by a number. Once they decoded the message, they realized that it contained a list of names, places, and even a social security number. And one of the names stood out to them more than the others: Gary Post. Now you might be wondering, why didn't they go after this guy right away? Well, here's the thing. When the police received the coded message, they didn't know who the Zodiac Killer was. They were just trying to figure out who was responsible for the brutal murders that had shaken the city to its core. So they never made the connection between the name on the piece of paper and the killer. They were essentially looking for a needle in a haystack. But now that they had a lead, they followed it up. They tracked down Gary Post and began watching him day and night. But he proved to be one step ahead of them. As the police closed in on him, he would disappear for days or even weeks at a time. Then he would reappear in a different town or city, always staying one step ahead of the law. It was like playing a game of hide and seek, except this time the stakes were much higher. Gary Post knew every trick in the book when it came to evading the police. He was a master of disguise, changing his appearance to fit in wherever he went. One time they saw him with a full beard and mustache. The next time they spotted him, he was clean-shaven. Another time they saw him wearing glasses. The next time, he was contact lenses. Gary Post was a ghost, a shadow that always seemed to be just out of reach. But the police weren't about to give up the chase. They followed him to the ends of the earth if they had to, but they knew they needed more than just his social security number. That's why they started digging deeper into his life, trying to find any connection he had to the Zodiac killings. And that's when they stumbled upon something that made their blood run cold. They found a diary belonging to one of Gary Post's former girlfriends. And inside it, they found a series of entries that detailed a terrifying pattern of behavior. Gary Post had been keeping a diary of his own. In it, he would write down the names of his victims, the dates he killed them, and the weapons he used. And what they found in his diary was nothing short of chilling. It was a first-hand account of the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror. Each entry was like a punch to the gut, a brutal reminder of the evil that Gary Post was capable of. But it also gave the police a valuable insight into the killer's mind. They learned that Gary Post was a sadist who got pleasure from inflicting pain. He was also a narcissist who bragged about his kills and took credit for the murders of innocent people. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the fact that he showed no remorse, no pity, or sadness for his victims. Instead, he seemed to revel in their deaths, taking a sick satisfaction in knowing that he had taken a life. As the police delved deeper into Gary Post's past, they uncovered a trail of darkness that stretched back years. They learned that he had a history of violence, a record that was clean enough to keep him off the radar of law enforcement, but dark enough to send chills down anyone's spine. With each passing day, the evidence against him mounted piece by piece. They were able to build a case that was airtight, a web of connections that left no room for doubt. Gary Post was the Zodiac Killer. But here's the thing, Gary Post was already dead. He had died in 2005 without ever facing justice for his crimes. The police were left with more questions than answers. Why did he kill? What drove him to commit such heinous acts? And why did he taunt the police for so long? Unfortunately, we may never know the answer to these questions. Gary Post took his secrets to his grave, leaving behind a legacy of fear and uncertainty. So, what does this mean for the case? Is it really over? Or are there still loose ends that need to be tied up? If you think that's the end of this story, well, you'd be wrong. There are still plenty of unanswered questions and theories surrounding the Zodiac Killer's case. For example, did Gary Post act alone, or was he part of a larger conspiracy? And what happened to the weapons he used in his crimes? These are just a few of the many questions that remain unanswered. If you want to know more about the Zodiac Killer case, click on the video that pops up on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates. Thanks for watching.